Some of the Chicago Bears' flaws on defense are just weaknesses that Dennis Allen is going to have to overcome, but other aspects of their struggles definitely can be improved on as the season goes on.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. On the show today, I want to take a closer look at Dennis Allen's defense and kind of find out where things are a little bit more set in stone and things we're just going to have to accept that are the realities of the good and bad of this defense this season, and where things might still change and be able to change, including the potential for free agents. A familiar face for both Dennis Allen and Ben Johnson hit free agency this week in the form of safety CJ Gardner-Johnson. We'll talk about him as a potential addition, plus some other names that are still out there if the Bears decide they want an upgrade on that side of the ball. But I'm left looking at this Bears defense, feeling like generally this defense is what it is. You know, there's not going to be a Micah Parsons trade or a Trey Hendrickson trade, you know, some sort of massive game-changing reinforcements coming. Like what they have on the defensive line, at linebacker, and in the secondary is generally what they're going to have. You can add, you know, more depth in veteran special teams guys at the end of the bench, but like this is sort of the crew you're going to be stuck with this season. And we've seen, you know, for a little while against the Vikings, it looked pretty good, and then it looked pretty bad, and then it looked really bad against the Lions, and then had some struggles against Dallas, and then figured some things out against Dallas. And I think that sort of up and down and sort of give and take will be a consistent theme for this defense, where at this point, I don't think we can ever expect this group to be like a top 10 defense this season. Right? I think we came into the year thinking, oh, well, Dennis Allen will just pick up where Matt Eberflus left off and maybe even better, and that this can be a top 10 group and then, you know, really shine and be a side of the ball the Bears can lean on. But through 3 games, they're 28th in points allowed and 29th in yards allowed. This has been, albeit inflated by a Lions game, a bottom 5 defense in the NFL in the major statistical categories. Now, I don't think they will continue to be a bottom 5 defense in the NFL all season long, but this feels like a Bears team that is going to have to lean a bit more on its offense than its defense, which is not a very common concept for us around here. It's been since the Mark Trestman years that's been the case. Obviously not a one-to-one comparison, just go to the last time the Bears had an offense that could carry a defense a little bit. And it's not to say that the defense is going to be this anchor that slows them down, but it does feel like the offense is going to be need to be the side of the ball that wins them the games, and the defense needs to be the side of the ball that doesn't lose them the games. Whereas in the past, sometimes it felt the other way around, where the defense had to win the game, the offense just had to not lose it. But it feels like the balance is shifting the other direction, which is understandable with an offensive head coach like Ben Johnson and a bunch of the resources this offseason all being put on this Bears offense. But I do think there are areas where we're going to see this Bears defense get better as the season goes on. And maybe you get closer to a, you know, middle of the pack defense, top 16 type of defense would be a great goal for this team to still sort of strive for and shoot for. Because there are going to be weaknesses in this defense that are just insurmountable, right? Like you don't, or not insurmountable, but sorry, but like inescapable is more the word I was looking for. That you're just, you know, you're not going to all of a sudden take this group that you have and tomorrow have a lights out cornerback room. Like there's just going to be flaws at cornerback all season that you're going to have to manage with Jalen Johnson on injured reserve and now Kyler Gordon missing time and, Nashawn Wright and Tyreek Stevenson having up and down performances so far to start the season. I think similar thing with the pass rush. Like it's a group that can get better, but it's not going to all of a sudden become a top 5 pass rush in the NFL. All of a sudden just players just randomly start playing better. Like there's going to be built-in flaws. But I do think this is a group that should see real, trustable, tangible improvement just as they get a little bit healthier. And that's assuming at the same time that no one else, gets hurt and continues to worsen things. But like you can chalk up some of their early season struggles to, of course, not having Jalen Johnson like we talked about, but also TJ Edwards is now missing games. Kyler Gordon is missing games. Austin Booker's on injured reserve. Shamar Turner missed the first few games because of injuries earlier to him throughout training camp in the preseason. That slowed him down. Like this has not been a full strength Bears defense. And sure, maybe no defense is full strength over the course of an NFL season, but 3 key starters on the back end is a lot of concentrated injuries to important players that not every other defense is dealing with. So in theory, Kyler Gordon should return sometime soon. Maybe not Sunday against the Raiders, but maybe after the bye week. I mean, we don't know exactly what the timeline is there, but the fact that they didn't put him on injured reserve suggests that they don't think he'll be out more than 4 weeks. And the Raiders game will be 4 weeks. So presumably, if he's not back this week, he should be back after the bye week. And I think it's really the same conversation for TJ Edwards for the time he's missed, right? When they choose not to put a guy on injured reserve, then they don't expect that he'll be out all that long. And so getting those 2 guys back will absolutely make this Chicago Bears defense better. And we can throw Austin Booker in this conversation. He was placed on injured reserve and is designated to return. We don't know whether that will be after 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, or 10 weeks, but adding him back into this defensive line rotation can only help. Again, he's not going to come in and solve the pass rush and make them a top 5 pass rush in football, but give you another young, athletic, energetic, high motor player that Dennis Allen can use in a variety of ways. I think that can absolutely be a bigger boost up front than say what they're getting from Daniel Hardy on the roster right now. Dominic Robinson just had a sack, but we think Austin Booker should be able to be better than those players and provide the Bears a boost somewhere in there. And then big picture, Jalen Johnson has not been ruled out for the entirety of the season. There is a chance that late in the season, and we don't know exactly when, maybe December at that point, he could also return. Like I'd circle week 14, the first game against the Green Bay Packers. When you play the Packers twice in 3 weeks, December 7th, that would be a great time to have Jalen Johnson come back. And you can say, well, maybe at that point, how much will it really matter? I mean, beating the Packers matters every time, whether there's playoff stakes or not, but that's a long ways away to get ahead of ourselves. The point is, like, there are reinforcements coming in the form of players getting healthier. You just got to hope that, you don't add any other major names to the injury list that helps you get worse, even while you're trying to get better there. I also think we can see some real improvement on this defense just sort of naturally from the progression of the season, and some players will get better. Player development is a real thing. It wasn't enough of a thing under the previous regime, but that's one of the big things we're looking for Dennis Allen to be different from Eberflus is tangible results of young players taking steps and progress. We're seeing early signs of that, and I think there's other players that can join in that mix. So we'll take a look at where this defense can get better from within, with guys just continuing to grow and show us greater form next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS top safety pick awards than anyone else. Because from footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. But Mazda brings that same intention to how they craft every model. You can feel that Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, with smooth handling and intuitive controls, and all-wheel drive is standard in every Mazda SUV crossover, so you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda. Move and be moved. So not only will this Bears defense get healthier, but I think there are specific players that we should all expect will get better, that are young guys early in their careers that are still ascending and have not reached their peak or the tip of their prime. So that's certainly not the case for some of the older veterans, and that's when we talk about some of the weaknesses that you're just going to have to live with. Like I'm not sure if Grady Jarrett is going to get back to playing better. Over the course of the season, typically, especially older players, the injuries just slowly start to mount up and you're taking these body blows and you get worn down and level of the play tends to decline the later you go into the season for older players with a lot of mileage on them. Like the first few games and early portion of the season is kind of supposed to be their best. And so when we're seeing Grady Jarrett struggle already, I have some doubts about his ability to return to form as a true impact playmaker. His value to the team seems to be leadership and motivation, and that absolutely is a real value, but I'm not sure it's a value that's equal to the contract they gave him in free agency. Never say never. These are talented, experienced players who have had a lot of success in their careers, and maybe they can find ways to pull off a big game here or there. But I'm not holding out too much more hope that all of a sudden Grady Jarrett's going to become something sustainably different over the course of the remainder of the season. I feel similarly about Kevin Byard at safety as he's struggled the last few weeks. I think he was a little better against Dallas, but wasn't challenged in some of the same ways. Like the older veteran players, they kind of reach a point where they are what they are, and the decline goes from there, and it's hard to expect them to bounce back in some of the same ways. But I think we're seeing Montez Sweat rounding into form a little bit more and had a better game against Dallas and has been winning his pass rushes at a fairly consistent rate for the last couple of games here. And then there's some specific young players I'm looking for that we're already seeing signs from some, and others I think we can anticipate seeing more progress. And all of it will be a really key measurement of how good this defensive coaching staff actually is. Because on the one hand, we can look at Dennis Allen and say, okay, how well is he blitzing and mixing up fronts and mixing up pass rush and sprinkling in different coverages and not being too predictable for opposing quarterbacks. Like we can evaluate Dennis Allen from a play calling standpoint, and then there's evaluating the defensive coaching staff from like an individual player development and growth standpoint. Are young guys getting better and progressing in their careers? And that doesn't mean that from week 1 to week 2 you get better, and then from week 2 to week 3 it's even better, and week 4 it's not that you get better every single game. There's going to be ups, and then there's going to be step backs and steps back and downs along the way where progress is not always linear, but trending upward in the same direction generally over the course of a season is what we want to see from a quality coaching staff of helping players get better and putting those players in positions to be successful. So like we talked a little bit on yesterday's podcast about Tyreek Stevenson. Great game against the Dallas Cowboys. We played a clip from him talking about some of the things he started doing differently that you can clearly see contributed to him playing well. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and take a listen because you can hear Stevenson in his own words talk about some things he was working through in terms of zone coverage and not seeing things the right way, but now preparing a little bit more, working extra hard at it, getting extra reps in, and it really starting to click for him. And that to me feels like positive connection with the coaching staff and real, tangible, sustainable player growth and development. Not that Stevenson is all of a sudden, fixed and solved and he's going to be a Pro Bowl cornerback the rest of the year, but that growth will be meaningful and not just a one-game aberration against a struggling Dallas Cowboys team. Same thing is true for Gervon Dexter along the defensive line. He is among the league leaders in pressure percentage by defensive tackles, like legitimately top 5 in the NFL in generating pressure as a pass rusher. Now, I think his pass rush win rate is a little bit lower, and I think his run defense has been a bit more challenging than that, but certainly we're seeing very real progress from Gervon Dexter. He has a sack, 2 hits, and 6 quarterback hurries, according to Pro Football Focus, on only 67 pass rushing snaps. So 9 pressures on 67 snaps is the same amount of pressures or more than a lot of guys who have rushed the passer a lot more than him this season. He's been very efficient in an expanded role overall in Dennis Allen's defense. I think we can expect Dexter to continue to be a more and more consistent pass rushing force on the defensive line, and you hope he can hold up in the running game a little bit more improved too as the season goes on there. But I think there's other guys that I look to as being next. Like I think we're already seeing it from Dexter and Stevenson, and if that's the sign of a coaching staff being effective in developing players, then there are other players that we can look to for greater development and expect, or at least look for their contributions to improve and develop and round out their games to give the Bears more perhaps later in the season than we're seeing from them so far. Like I would put Dayo Odeyingbo in this category. This is his first year in Chicago, first year with these teammates, first year learning everything, but he's still only 26. Actually, he turns 27 today as this podcast comes out. So today is Dayo Odeyingbo's birthday as this podcast comes out, but still a young player early in his career. He was drafted in 2021. Like this is his 5th year in the NFL. He has still not reached peak form of what Dayo Odeyingbo can be. And this coaching staff brought in Dayo Odeyingbo with the idea of him developing and him still getting even better in Chicago than what he was in Indianapolis before this. And so we need to see that development as a reflection of the coaching staff helping him get better. Austin Booker, same conversation. Flashed as a rookie. Haven't seen him so far this year because he's been on injured reserve. And so I'm not expecting Austin Booker to come in off injured reserve whenever his first game is and be, instantly a 3 times better player than he was last year. He's obviously missed development time, but you hope from the first game he plays to the last game he plays, you see more progress, more development, more growth, and as a result, more sacks, more hits, more quarterback pressures. I wonder if we can even maybe, and this one's a little bit more of a stretch, but can we see some of that from Nahshon Wright? Can we see them salvage this player at all? Someone who clearly seemed to be thriving in OTAs and early training camp. Like there's something there that can click for him. He also is 27. His birthday was yesterday, Tuesday. As it's weird. He and Dayo Odeyingbo were born exactly 1 day apart, drafted in the same draft class in the 3rd round. Anyway, weird coincidences here as we're going through this. Still a young player, right? Still not at the peak of what he can be in his career, but obviously struggling a lot out there. But they seem to have helped Tyreek Stevenson break through some developmental walls, and maybe over the course of a full season with Jalen Johnson out, maybe they can find some progress there for Nahshon Wright. That might be asking a lot, but it's still another name to keep an eye on there. And then we'll throw in Shamar Turner, a little bit more in the Austin Booker category of like Shamar Turner just made his NFL debut last week against the Cowboys, and I thought struggled, was not great out there, but you want to just see him get better from his first game against the Cowboys to his last game against the Lions in week 18, and feel like that's a player that's not going to individually change your whole pass rush with his dominance and whatever, but like someone who just, he's getting better, and he's having a bigger impact slowly over the course of the season. And all of a sudden, if you stack up, Stevenson gets a little bit better, Dexter gets a little bit better, Odeyingbo gets a little bit better, Booker gets a little bit better, Shamar Turner gets a little bit better, maybe even Nahshon Wright gets a little bit better. All of a sudden, those 6 or 7 little bits can add up to real measured overall improvements across the defense. It's asking a lot, and not every player gets better all the time. You assume every young player is going to keep getting better, and there's ups and downs, and some guys just don't have it in them, and maybe Nahshon Wright is that at this stage of his career. I mean, and if it hasn't clicked yet, is it going to click now in year 5 or whatever he is? Like, maybe not. But we're already seeing signs of it in Stevenson and Dexter, so I think that gives us reason to think we can see additional signs of it in other young players as things get going. We could also see at some point, they say, all right, it's enough is enough. Let's go add a little bit of something else to help this defense. Again, not going to be a Parsons or Hendrickson level type of deal, but I think there's still some guys out there that the Bears could say, whether it's another injury that pops up or they just say, hey, we need to get better here in a hurry. There's a couple veterans I think we should keep our names on, including a veteran just added to the open market, CJ Gardner-Johnson, released from the Houston Texans. He just so happens to have been a former player of Dennis Allen's on the New Orleans Saints and Ben Johnson on the Detroit Lions. If there was ever a landing spot for CJ Gardner-Johnson, it feels like this one. So we'll take a look at what dynamics go into that potential decision, why it may or may not be that likely, but some other names too with connections to this Bears coaching staff that could make a big difference. Next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Right now, FanDuel is making sure you're ready for every kickoff with a can't-miss offer to start the NFL season. Because right now on FanDuel, if you place your first $5 bet and that bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use anywhere across the app. So say you want to put a $5 bet on this Bears-Raiders game this weekend. The Bears are 1.5-point underdogs on the road heading into Vegas, but the money line has Bears minus 106 straight up, and the over-under is set at 47.5 points. So a $5 bet on any of those or any other game, any prop bet, any other sport in the FanDuel app, you hit that first $5 bet, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets in addition to the winnings from your $5 bet. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. So injuries should help the Bears defense get better as they recover. Young player development should also help the Bears defense get better as they grow early in their careers. And I also think the allure of outside players is something I'm surprised they haven't gone to yet. And I understand you want to see what you got with your guys, especially a couple of regular season games, see how they hold up. But especially after the big loss to the Lions, I wonder if they might make a change now that Jalen Johnson's on injured reserve. And kind of wondering if they're going to bring in, an addition to the secondary to try and bolster things. It doesn't even necessarily have to be at the cornerback spot. And that's where I come back to someone like CJ Gardner-Johnson, who of course is a safety, but plays all over the defense. He can be a slot cornerback for you, and is kind of, he can be a free safety, a strong safety, a slot player, kind of a jack of all trades. Early in his career, he was more of a nickel back with the New Orleans Saints and CJ Gardner-Johnson and Dennis Allen, who drafted him in the 4th round in 2019. So if there's any coach in the NFL that knows what you're getting with CJ Gardner-Johnson and perhaps how to best handle CJ Gardner-Johnson, it is Dennis Allen, the guy who drafted him and has seen him grow and develop. I know Sean Payton was the head coach at the time, but Dennis Allen was the defensive coordinator who was coaching CJ Chauncey Gardner-Johnson at the time. The elephant in the room here, if you're not familiar with CJ Gardner-Johnson, is like his, I don't know if antics is the right word there, but he comes with a lot of off-field concerns and history there. Not so much like legal trouble. I don't think he's been like arrested or anything, but he is a big personality, and perhaps a personality that is outsized to the player that he is on the field. He has said multiple times he'd like to legally change his name to CD Deuce, like CD Gardner-Johnson, but then the number 2, like CD. And he's got a big personality, and this is part of what led to the Houston Texans releasing him this week. There were reports that he was a bit divisive in the locker room and critical of the coaching staff and calling for things to be different. And I think we instantly assume that's all bad, and some of that can have some validity. I mean, if the team is struggling and you think there are things they can do better, sometimes that can be leadership and sometimes that can be absolutely disruptive. But the reporting from Aaron Wilson of the he covers the Texans. He used to be for the Houston Chronicle and some other places. That there was friction behind the scenes with CJ Gardner-Johnson complaining about his role, wanting to blitz more, and then even communicating that he wanted to be traded. And so ultimately they ended up releasing him. He was critical of teammates, complained about his role, et cetera, that makes you go, well, okay, I don't want that in the Chicago Bears locker room. And ultimately that's probably what the reality will be. The Bears might say, hey, we know what headache this is because Dennis Allen drafted him. And then Ben Johnson was a part of the same team as CJ Gardner-Johnson in 2023 when he was with the Detroit Lions and a starting safety for them on the back end. They had signed him to a 1-year deal at the time. And I know he got hurt in training camp and then had some ups and downs over the course of the season and then went on injured reserve earlier in that year, maybe came back late at the end of the year, but wasn't a full season of Gardner-Johnson. But I also think with players like CJ Gardner-Johnson, these types of issues that we're describing here generally only happen when the team is losing. The Houston Texans are 0-3, and the defense hasn't even been horrible. The offense has been the bigger issue there for sure. I think they're technically like a top 5 defense in points allowed. But like just like with any other sort of like, you think about the diva receivers of the past, Terrell Owens and Chad Ochocinco and even Randy Moss, like all these players, even Tyreek Hill now, like they're not a problem when the team is winning and successful. They're only a big problem when the team is losing, because generally when they're winning, they don't have anything to complain about and they don't have any room to complain. But when you're losing, that's when they can be more of a problem in the locker room. And so that's sort of the thing you have to weigh with CJ Gardner-Johnson is like, if he can help you win and you do win, he won't be a problem. And like I said, Dennis Allen knows the personality and knows what he has to do to manage him fairly successfully in the Saints, although they did end up trading him at the end of his rookie contract. But then Ben Johnson and the Lions saw how to manage him there too. And you might be saying, well, the Bears have Jaquan Brisker and Kevin Byard. What do they want to do with CJ Gardner-Johnson? But I think when you look at this Bears secondary, while Kyler Gordon is hurt, you could plug CJ Gardner-Johnson into that slot cornerback position and not have to have Nick McLeod in your starting lineup. And then even once Kyler Gordon comes back, something we've seen Dennis Allen do a lot through these first 3 games, and it's something he did also previously with the New Orleans Saints, is he likes to go to a 3 safety package, a dime personnel package where they have 3 safeties and 3 cornerbacks to be 6 defensive backs on the field with only then 2 linebackers and then 3 defensive linemen. And in the Bears defense so far this year, that third safety has been Jonathan Owens, husband of Simone Biles. Through the first 3 games, it's been 8 or 9 plays a game, so it's not like this humongous role, but it is something that allows Dennis Allen to get more creative with his coverages and his blitzes. And I wonder if having Jonathan Owens back there limits some of what he can do there. Essentially, he ends up usually brings Jaquan Brisker up in the box, and then Owens and Kevin Byard are deep safeties in those packages. But I can't help but feel like if it was CJ Gardner-Johnson in that position instead of Jonathan Owens, that you would A, trust the coverage more, just generally, like I think he's a better football player, and then B, it would allow Dennis Allen to maybe be able to do more things than he could trust his coverage to hold up better with Gardner-Johnson than Jonathan Owens. I think the reason why we won't see this happen for the Bears is partially the locker room stuff, but also because CJ Gardner-Johnson is not the only Dennis Allen safety that has been available to them this whole time. Unsigned in free agency are 3 former New Orleans Saints safeties that all played for Dennis Allen. Marcus Williams, I believe, was a draft pick by the Saints. Von Bell, I believe, was a first-round draft pick by the Saints. And then Marcus May had signed with the Saints and was started for them for a couple seasons in his career. There are 3 former Saints starting safeties that are free agents and have been free agents throughout training camp and the preseason. And the Bears have had as much opportunity as they would want to sign them or bring them in for a workout to be an upgrade over Jonathan Owens, or maybe play the slot role, be an upgrade over Nick McLeod. And they've declined to sign any of those 3 guys. So I'm a little less convinced that they would all of a sudden decide that CJ Gardner-Johnson is the one they want to sign when he also comes with off-field or sideline or locker room question marks there. There's also other veteran free agents out there if they just want to upgrade at corner because they decide at some point, hey, Nahshon Wright's just not getting the job done. There's James Bradbury, who's coming off of a torn Achilles last season, but still recovering and has been a solid veteran starter for the Eagles and the Giants, and I think he was with the Panthers in that mix. Like, he could be a big upgrade. Asante Samuel Jr. is coming off of a neck fusion, not supposed to be ready until maybe the second half of the season, but he could be an upgrade, absolutely. Or someone like Kendall Fuller, certainly a veteran who could play some slot or some outside if the Bears want to upgrade. There are veteran free agents out there. I'm left looking at it and saying, well, if they haven't signed somebody by now, what's going to make them decide to sign someone, tomorrow or in the very near future? So maybe the bye week could be a chance to get somebody new in, and if first 4 weeks is enough time to say, hey, we don't like what we're seeing, let's make the change now. But it just feels like it would be late and it'll be reactive and not very proactive. So we'll see. If the Bears do sign any free agents, you can be sure we'll break it down for you right here in the Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen every single day. Coming back tomorrow and make us your first listen once again for Crossover Thursday with your boy Q from Locked On Raiders previewing Sunday's matchup. And in the meantime, every time you tune in to Locked On Bears, you're always going to get another opportunity to bear down.